troops. BoJack gets into a scuffle with a Navy SEAL, like an actual SEAL, over the concept of dibs. Todd dates an e-girl with a keen interest in his bank's routing number. The dibs incident serves as a distraction for BoJack to ignore talking about his past with Diane, and he continuously feeds into the news cycle's obsession with the story. In the end, the incident is resolved when Mr. Peanut Butter gets a bucket stuck on his head, and everyone kind of forgets about it. Now, I hate this episode's dibs fiasco. I mean, infuriating in a completely intentional way. The fact that everything BoJack says gets taken out of context to make him seem worse, that so many people are eager to get as outraged as possible over nothing. Of course, all of this applies to BoJack as well. Princess Carolyn warns him about basically everything that happens at the very beginning, and yet he still falls for the outrage trap of getting involved with the storyline at all, which, and I think this goes without saying, but if I see a box of muffins in the produce aisle,
Wait, what?
lots or less dibs and more, someone made a healthy life decision here. Of course, this episode isn't about dibs. It's about BoJack's unwillingness to take the high road at literally any opportunity that he gets to do so, and how consistently that ruins opportunities for him. BoJack is a petty individual, and yeah, in this episode it's easy to side with him because he's arguing over a pack of muffins and is basically in the right. But this episode really just primes the viewer to start seeing more future conflicts through BoJack's perspective. He always thinks he's in the right in these sorts of incidents and never takes the actual healthy approach to conflict resolution. It's a humorous bit in this episode, but by the later seasons, it starts to become a depressive cycle he's unable to break apart from, which is par for the series. Prickly muffin. BoJack's old co-star Sarah Lynn gets out of rehab and crashes at his house while also trashing his house with nightly parties. He refuses to crack down on her for a while, hoping to simultaneously recapture his own childhood vicariously through her, make up for lost time, and also relive the past. But after their relationship starts turning more sexual, he realizes that he should put his foot down for real to try to improve her life. An offer she refuses because she's a former pop idol who never has to put up with anybody saying no to her. Rather than accepting the irony of this situation, BoJack instead chooses to accept that she's merely a product of Hollywood, and there was nothing he could have done. Another Season 1 episode with no real conclusion, though far from that being a negative trait, it actually reinforces very early on how flawed many of the characters are. There's no real conclusion because these characters rarely learn from their mistakes or grow from the mistakes. And that's not the only thing that this episode sets up either. In addition to introducing the Sarah Lynn plotline, it also name drops characters who will appear later, notably Herb Kazaz and Vanessa Gecko. And of course there's an ending stinger of two paparazzi birds getting blackmail regarding BoJack's relationship with the former child star. Something more typical of a TV sitcom arc, but in this case ultimately nothing comes of it, but I will get to that aspect later.
I think there's a better way to do this.
Strong as an early season episode of any show really can be. The purpose of first seasons is to set up as much as possible while still telling a story, and this episode manages to not just tell a story, but set up future events in such a subtle way that you don't even realize what's foreshadowing and what's a throwaway line until much later in the show when it pays off. This form of illusion is especially effective at making the universe seem more consistent, that events aren't happening in a specific order to
Oh my god, am I
rather
fucking...
that they occur in an ordinary way and the reactions to these events are realistic. Zoe's and Zelda's. An episode about BoJack helping Todd with his rock opera that parallels Herb helping BoJack's early career. But when the rock opera seems to be getting off the ground, Todd realizes he might get the chance to move out, which terrifies BoJack into coming up with an elaborate scheme that ruins Todd's chances at success or ever leaving. Meanwhile, a BuzzFeed writer follows Mr. Peanut Butter around under the pretense of writing an article about him, when in actuality he's merely trying to get back together with his ex-girlfriend Diane. I remember BoJack as being a show that starts out kind of slow but gets good after.
Oh my god, what?
But I forgot just how few was. This episode sets up and still subverts so many old television tropes and constantly plays with our expectations in a way that makes the show worth watching and rewatching. Diane and Mr. Peanut Butter's relationship is
What?
in the show would exist purely as a stepping stone for a relationship between her and BoJack to flourish, After all, they're both main characters with so much depth and nuance, of course they have to end up together. But since the show tries to be realistic when it comes to its character stories, this doesn't end up being the case. Their relationship is one that, despite its faults, is working out fine, at least for now. And so a former lover trying to weasel his way into the relationship because he gets Diane better than Mr. Peanut Butter has to learn the hard way that real life isn't a TV show. And we see BoJack forced to confront this fact in nearly the same way so many times throughout the future of the show. As is typical for BoJack Horseman, we get a ton of subtle calls forward. BoJack and Herb meet for the first time in a flashback, and of course, the very first thing BoJack says to him
Okay.
is, "Get cancer,
Oh.
Claude." Todd's former girlfriend Emily also appears, half her face obstructed off screen, and she doesn't get a major role until season 3. And of course, the real star of the show, character actress Margot Martindale, first appears in this episode. Despite the episode following a very common A-plot, B-plot formula, the through lines of the episode make it feel much less formulaic and much more natural. Live fast, Diane Wynn. Diane,
What the fuck? I don't even know.
in to offer brief condolences.
Is this somebody else?
Taking care of most of
Is this a different person doing the voiceover? What the fuck? Why did his voice get deeper?
to do it themselves. Torn between her frustration and came to the funeral, and
I thought this was a one-person channel.
his loneliness
Am I wrong?
vicariously through her and her annoying family,
Or is this just like recorded the next morning?
spent much of her childhood on. In the end, BoJack joins her, telling her that
I mean, I'm not like,
she's overrated and she shouldn't try.
no, I'm not criticizing the video for it. It's just funny. I was just like,
In the B-plot, Todd turns BoJack's house into a tourist attraction, which quickly spirals out of control in a comic relief.
why would I do okay, I don't even know.
Of course, BoJack would be the one to tell Diane that family is
I kind of want to go.
considering his relationship with his own family. And of course, in typical BoJack fashion, he's the one who later ignores his own advice when he later reconnects with his mother. Whereas the family sitcoms that define BoJack's early life would have had some sort of family is everything message, BoJack himself seems weirdly above defining his life by this old TV moral when he's so ready to follow them the rest of the time. It's an early glimpse into the type of trauma that really had to have defined his childhood in such a way that the lesson couldn't be taken away from him by the years of detachment Hollywood blessed/cursed him with. Family is a sinkhole is something BoJack also has to relearn though. He tries to recreate his childhood through the DeWitt family, only to turn his back on them later when he sees them mistreating his friend. It's a found family type of relationship schism. Your blood relatives versus the people you want to spend time with. BoJack wants to spend time around his friends over his family, although we later learn that this is just something he tells himself, when the reality is that he prefers spending time around enablers. Although the message he leaves Herb at the end of the episode shows that he's still at least partially committed to something else. Our story is a D story. BoJack and Mr. Peanut Butter get into a metaphorical dick measuring contest over Diane, which results in BoJack stealing the Hollywood D. They scheme
I can't. I've done that like twice. That's kind of embarrassing.
BoJack's stealing and claim it was his own idea of a grand romantic gesture. In the end, seeing how much the idea of a public spectacle discomforts Diane, he instead has a small romantic proposal with just the two of them, which also turns into a giant spectacle.
Based?
Meanwhile, Todd, who is still in prison,
Based Mr. Peanut Butter?
gets involved with two different games, trying to court
My King?
time. It's like a 2 prom dates episode of a sitcom, except it ends in a race war. It's pretty typical for a sitcom to have some sort of romantic triangle plot that entangles its characters, but outside the world of television, romantic triangles are usually much less equilateral. Trying some grand romantic gesture in order to win over your friend's girlfriend is considered kind of a dick move in the real world. Although BoJack and Mr. Peanut Butter's friendship is even kind of questionable in this episode. Through the series so far, they've really had a one-sided relationship. While Peanut Butter surely views BoJack as his friend, BoJack has always been pretty indifferent in return, barely tolerating the dog's presence.
Ooh.
During this episode, they suddenly become actual rivals, and then in one scene they're friends again, purely because it was needed for the emotional
Oh my god.
plot.
How did Bro.
It's done in enough of a tongue-in-cheek way that it doesn't really bad writing, only lazy at worst and referential otherwise. But the only real reason something like this sticks out as much as it does is because the show has such strong and consistent character writing otherwise. And I think Todd's B-plot poking fun at other sitcom-y cliches also really helps to make sure you're not taking anything else too seriously either. Say anything. Princess Carolyn gets Bojack a spokesperson job for a bourbon, but he runs away from the shooting and Todd fumbles his way into his place. Instead, Bojack tries to get back together with Princess Carolyn, and she decides to drop her career in order to focus on one thing, being happy. Which is something that's very difficult to do when you're involved with Bojack. Their new relationship gets cancelled as abruptly as it began when Bojack receives a call, less than cordially inviting him to Malibu to take part in the next episode. This leaves PC to try to get back into her career by sabotaging her enemies and getting Bojack a new job, starring in a romantic comedy about the previous episode's B-plot. So much of the unhappiness in this show comes from characters comparing themselves to others who they view as better off than themselves. Bojack makes himself miserable when he compares his life to Mr. Peanut Butter's, as they've had
Can I not do that again? Thank you. Thank you.
Princess Carolyn compares herself to Vanessa Gecko, who seems to be able to do everything that PC can. The show even pokes a bit of fun at the idea of gauging your success on how well others are doing with Charlie Witherspoon, who gets a show on NBC by getting his tie stuck in a copier, and Todd, who stumbles blindly into Bojack's old gig.
Well, no, he didn't get...
As if to say,
I mean,
people by their successes,
that's like a nepotism meme, though, right? Like,
to get to that point.
it's not just a...
This is the first episode not to focus entirely on Bojack, with most of his actions taking place off-screen or in flashbacks outside of the middle of the episode.
Oh my god, like, what the fuck is wrong with me in this room, bro?
Drops the comedy-first approach to storytelling. Being the first episode...
This is not a hard fucking room, dude.
To wrap things up, despite...
I can't. I don't even know, dude. Oh yeah, never mind. Sorry.
Bojack and Diane head to Malibu to speak with Herb Pizzazz for what they think might be Bojack's last chance for closure. On the way there, he tells her the story of how the two got their breaks on horsing around, with Herb getting his script picked up and refusing to let the show go on without his friend. But after several years on the air, Herb gets caught in a scandal and Hollywood begins turning its back on him. He knows his career is over, but holds out hope that Bojack will threaten to leave the show if they fire his friend. But when the network threatens Bojack's hopes of playing his hero secretariat, he caves to their demands and abandons his friend. Back in the present, Bojack and Diane meet with Herb, who still holds resentment.
Like, okay. I have no fucking clue how I just died to that. I have no idea.
Scuffle before Bojack gets kicked out. Wallowing in self-pity after the incident, he ends up trying to kiss Diane. Bojack demands a nice wrap-up at the end of his meeting with Herb, one just like you might see on Horsing Around. Instead, he has to deal with the fact that an "I'm sorry" 20 years after abandoning somebody isn't sufficient, and that his actions still have consequences, even if he doesn't think about them. All of this is something that he knew about himself for years, though. At the party before Herb makes his big break, Charlotte tells Bojack that he's a coward, something that echoes during his conversation with the executive where he fails to stand up for Herb or even get a word in. The writers for BoJack Horseman give themselves one F-bomb per season, typically reserved for when a relationship is irreparably damaged, or in this case, when it becomes apparent that the relationship is unsalvageable to BoJack. Because while he had hoped to wrap up everything nicely, there never was any actual chance of doing so. BoJack's past relationships are ruined for good, and many of his present and future relationships are as well, he just hasn't realized it yet. Force majeure. Mr. Peanut Butter gets his driver's license suspended for chasing a mailman, and Todd becomes his personal driver. Bojack conspires to sabotage Diane and Mr. Peanut Butter's wedding with another elaborate scheme involving character actress Margot Martin.
Oops.
But before the schemes can quite get to that,
oh my god, fuck, dude.
Todd discovers Bojack's sabotage of his rock opera and confronts him about it, forcing Bojack to accept that there are some things he can't change, and accept that Diane and Mr. Peanut Butter are really getting married. The thematic follow-up to D's story, Force Majeure, is a more realistic take on the cliché of crashing a wedding for dramatic declarations of love. We're spared the
I can't.
of Bojack actually interrupting the wedding, and at least for a few more seasons, his relationships with those closest to him can...
Oh my god, bro.
Another closed-off romantic endeavor in this episode is Bojack's relationship with Princess Carolyn, who begins seeing Vincent Adult Man during this episode, and at the wedding reception he laments that, although he never really imagines himself dating PC, he's still upset. And
I didn't extend it. Am I, like, actually bad at this game? I think I might actually just be bad.
In life, that when he finally can't get something, he begins wanting it even more, not being used to rejection in that way. So he doesn't care about Princess Carolyn until she's in a relationship, and he's not interested in actively pursuing Diane romantically until she's engaged to Mr. Peanut Butter. It's also fitting that the moment he tried kissing her last episode comes immediately after a different door closed in his face, that of his reconciliation with Herb. One Trick Pony. Work is underway on the film adaptation of the story of Mr. Peanut Butter stealing the Hollywood D, although work is slow going as Todd keeps reimagining the story as so many different things before ultimately creating a bi-monthly box of curated snacks. BoJack takes this as a personal slight, assuming that ruining his chances of career revitalization is Todd's way of getting revenge for ruining his rock opera. But no, it turns out that Todd had decided to be the bigger man and leave that in the past. Meanwhile, BoJack reads the memoir Diane finished and is not happy with it because it makes him look bad. He demands that she redo the book, but Diane instead leaks the first few chapters online, in order to show that it really humanizes him. But rather than seeing this, BoJack just fires her. Not quite a bottle episode, but a majority of the scenes here still do take place in one location, Mr. Peanut Butter's house. On top of that, every single plotline is a BoJack plotline, at least as far as he's concerned. We actually inverted near the end when he accuses Todd of being selfish towards his career, as that's something BoJack would absolutely do in the same situation. Instead,
like,
the degradation of the movie
there has to be an easier way to do this room that I just haven't seen.
He's not as important as he thinks he is, and this then gets reflected in his relationship with the fake Diane later. When he learns that it was merely an attempt at staying in character and that, yes, the real Diane still can't stand his guts, he takes out his frustration about things not going his way by canceling his book and firing Diane. BoJack's desire for people to like him is something that varies by how much he likes himself, or rather how much he desires to like himself. After the events of the telescope, he's given up on inner happiness and therefore no longer cares about whether the book makes him look good or not. But whenever his life or career gets back on track, he finds that he suddenly wants to love himself again, and when that fails, others love him instead. In the end, he can never get what he wants, as he's not even sure himself what that is. Downer ending. Hoping to create a better book than Diane's tell-all, BoJack, Sarah Lynn, and Todd go on a
I think this is possible, right? Yeah, that. Okay, I remember that.
More blood, they managed to create absolute gibberish. Just complete nonsense. But the trip does make BoJack confront that he could have chosen another life than the one that he has. He confronts Diane once again and asks if it's not too late to change who he is, but doesn't get an answer. Downer Ending is one of the first truly experimental episodes that we get.
Can I not? Thank you.
Really being pushed to their highest potential. The rapidly changing appearances serve to reflect how rapidly shifting BoJack's wants and desires can be, and when he finally settles on an interpretation of reality that he likes, the colors and shapes finally rearrange themselves into something more sane and simple. Of course, this is just a possibility in his mind, not the reality he chose, and so it's short-lived enough to make him long for it again. But knowing that you want something is different from actively seeking out to get that something, and BoJack ultimately seeks validation, not just for himself, but for the part of himself that could have been. It's an interesting choice to have the plot of this episode effectively mirror the first episode of the series. BoJack is once again struggling to...
Oh my god.
This time, he's making a much more active effort to really commit to the idea and enrolls the help of those closest to him. Those with whom he's already had a falling out, but also who have gotten to know him well enough to actually write a true tale.
Stop.
But in keeping with his wishes, these are people who he's only tried to show his best sides to. People he's always gone out of his way to please or manipulated to thinking he's just there to please them. Naturally, the self-congratulatory nature of his writing staff will cause the project to end up like all of his other vanity works. Later. Diane's book about BoJack is out, and it's as big a success as anybody could have hoped for. His career is back on track, he's winning awards, and there's finally a real chance he's going to get to make the Secretariat movie he's always wanted to.
Lol?
Todd and Mr. Peanut Butter open a Halloween store in January, which gets abandoned when they come up with smoothies, which get abandoned for waffles, and so on. While Princess Carolyn breaks up and then gets back together with Vincent Adultman, who decides to stop being such an adult man. A recurring theme of this
Should I
episode is nothing.
should I just
Not like it has no recurring theme, but that each character has some interpretation of
how I don't remember how is this hard? I don't know. It just takes longer, I guess. Like
about unimportant knowledge.
should I oops.
Secretariat begins running from a featureless void that chases him. Bojack aces the audition by mirroring this speech, and at the end, Diane believes that deep down there is nothing. That we're just the things we do on the outside.
Oops.
It's these different understandings of life that Bojack has to grapple with as he finally gets everything he ever wanted.
Why would I not just grab
It all in the end.
the thing?
We, like Bojack, don't get a definitive lesson from this episode. Things just happen sometimes, and trying to find some deeper meaning is usually just a waste of time that distracts us from whatever may come next.
Okay.
This episode ends with a licensed musical sting playing over a montage, followed by a short scene and then another licensed bit over another long shot, like they really tried to pull the licensed pop song in here twice. It's really one of my only faults with the episode, as it does a good job of wrapping up what it wants to without closing off future possibilities, and oh, are the possibilities great. Season 1. The first season of a show is rarely the most well-received season,
Okay.
and for a pretty understandable reason. When the writers are mostly concerned with establishing characters, it's much more difficult to explore them. And the staff has no idea what audiences will respond well to, and what will be considered.
Do I really want to do it from here?
Too heavily
Probably not.
of the show, and audiences don't like that, they risk ruining the.
That's the wrong room.
And while many of these potential pitfalls.
This is the biggest like
More often, it's better for studios to
choke point right now.
by never pigeonholing themselves into too tight of a niche. Of course,
Oops.
being so broad can end up making the show bland and thin with no real focus to make the entire season as cohesive as it deserves to be. But BoJack Horseman manages to avoid so many of these pitfalls with its tight writing, quick progression, and yet keeping things so down to earth. Hollywood is a fast-paced place, and so none of this ever comes across as jarring. Big changes can occur in the lives of the characters, and we can go from a romantic comedy film to a bi-monthly box of curated snacks without coming across like anything is paced too awkwardly to follow. There's also the expectations that the first season sets and is expected to set. People rarely go into a season of television expecting a deep character dive right away. We need to care about the characters first before we care about their problems. BoJack Horseman does a good job at ensuring that the show is properly entertaining so we can endear ourselves to the characters before anything heavy gets to happen.
I just need to like buff for this, honestly. I just need to buff for that.
So it's not
I don't know why I'm not.
with a heavy emotional burden held against characters who are too shallow to support their end. Watching a character fail is only heartbreaking if we care about whether they succeed in the first place. Brand new couch.
That was just really bad.
BoJack is struggling to get into character as Secretariat, his brand new attitude preventing him from being in the character's head during a scene that's supposed to be sad. He does a bit of soul searching and realizes that working on Horse and Four never actually prepared him for acting in a serious drama, or even really acting at all. It isn't until his mother calls and tells him that he'll never be happy that he finally accepts everything wrong with trying out his new outlook on life, and goes back to the old BoJack, the one who was right for the part all along. Meanwhile, Todd learns to accept that BoJack has a new couch, and Princess Carolyn loses her roles to the up-and-coming Rutabaga. Brand new couch, brand new attitude, same guy crashing on the couch, same guy living with the attitude. This episode is really a microcosm of so many of the show's plot lines. A good thing happens to BoJack, he tries to turn his life around, life does something bad to him, he gives up on self-improvement. At least here we have a slightly happy ending, in that BoJack is able to finally get his line delivery right as a result, but it also ends up sending a message that he'll be able to continue barely functioning this way for the rest of his career. Able to continue with projects, but never quite getting close enough to learning what he really wants out of life. The first episode of Season 2, and the new furniture isn't the only change in scenery we're getting. Shot composition is now much more ambitious than before, with simple 3/4 perspective shots becoming less and less common. Now we're more likely to see characters posing dynamically, and the amount of movement during shots has increased as well. It's not as though it wasn't happening before, and it's not like it's all quick tracking shots now, but there's a noticeable increase in what we can call ambition from the storyboarders. Yesterdayland.
Why am I dying to that all of a sudden? What the bro? If it's not one thing, it's another. Holy shit, bro. Okay, watch. It's fucking easy.
BoJack Horseman falls in love with Wanda, a woman who's been in a coma for the last 30 years and therefore has no idea he's a celebrity. But when she meets a Soviet sleeper agent who's also been in a coma for 30 years, Bojack grows jealous and tries to destroy their relationship. Wanda is appalled by this behavior until Bojack owns up to it, admitting that it's part of who he is, but also that he's hoping to become a better person.
Okay, so I'm dying to the stupidest shit possible. Can I not do that? Can I not do that? Can I not do that?
It's happened too many times, and we've already seen him going far enough to accept that fact. So by the second season, it's less a matter of if he will fail, and more a matter of how and when, and what effect it'll have on everything else in his life. Similarly to Kelsey's rant, so many of the characters are stuck in their ways. A boon to television characters as we get a consistent something to fall back onto. What's the point of establishing strong, complex characters if they're just going to change their lives and learn from mistakes all the time? But rather than relying on this cliché to support lazy writing, BoJack Horseman uses its characters' utter contempt for change and self-improvement as fodder for plot lines that dissect how they can live their lives in that way. It's more compelling for characters to fail if they're actually trying not to. The thing is, despite Bojack feeling like he can never change, there's still enough of him that genuinely believes he still can, and that part of him makes him afraid. He sabotages his relationship with Wanda because for a moment, he thinks she might really turn him into a different, maybe even better person. And the main reason he thinks this is because she doesn't already know who he is. Bojack has internalized that the reason for his constant failures are the people around him, but we already know that nothing is ever his fault. This isn't a surprise. Still broken. Bojack, Sarah Lynn, and the rest of the cast of Horsing Around join friends, well-wishers, and schmoozers at Herb's funeral. When Sarah Lynn is given a floppy disk with an allusion to Herb's gold, Bojack takes it as a posthumous treasure hunt and declares that the original family has to solve the mystery. The mystery takes them through much of their past together, back to the original studio lot in which the show was filmed, where they eventually learn that Herb's gold refers to a book he had written that Sarah Lynn promised she'd see published. But the book was terrible, and so Herb's longtime friend Harry Winkler had it destroyed in order to preserve his legacy. In the end, the narrative states that the only reason Bojack went on a mystery tour is because he was hoping to assign meaning to the meaningless.
Well, I don't think that's savable, but I guess we'll see.
Before, he's still clinging to hope that
that's certainly not savable.
Between the two of them, and of course, some sort of treasure is just vague enough to be his friend's forgiveness. So he has to at least attempt to seek it out. But far from the realm of television, real life doesn't kill off characters for a reason. People just die, and Bojack and the rest have to accept that things can be random. At least, that's what we like to believe. As much as BoJack Horseman is a show about characters trying to navigate a world obsessed with media, it is, at the end of it all, a show. So the writers won't actually kill off a character for no reason. They'll kill off Herb to further BoJack's character arc and set BoJack off of a potential source of emotional reprieve. And while it has the potential to be done in such a way as to come off as trite or shallow, this episode manages to straddle the line between gratuity and hypocrisy well enough as to come across as sincere in how little meaning death can really have. After the party. Diane receives a thoroughly unwanted surprise birthday party organized by Mr. Peanut Butter, which results in the two of them having an argument over nothing before wondering if their relationship is doomed to failure. Princess Carolyn sees a boy who looks suspiciously like Vincent and wonders if he doesn't have a second family. Todd gets involved in a complex relationship with Two Bones, and Bojack
Why?
in the woods to try to make things right. This episode highlights 3 relationships, well, 4 if you count the phones, but let's not, each of which is concerned with a different time. PC and Vincent break up over the past and how Vincent hid parts of himself from her. Diane and Mr. Peanut Butter are concerned over the present, and if they're going to live the same way for the rest of their lives. Bojack and Wanda are concerned over their future, and if they might end up with the same woes as Diane and Mr. Peanut Butter, or if they'll have some entirely new woes that still lead to strife in their relationship. In the end, all 3 relationships reject anxiety as an emotion that doesn't lead anywhere positive if it's something you keep to yourself. Vincent gets broken up with for lying, while Wanda and Mr. Peanut Butter both encourage their partners to open up more and work through potential future issues together.
Can I not I'm pretty, you know what, I know why I died to that. It's because Parrot died to that.
To view the narrative as celebrating that they at least took the chance of love in the first place.
Like Parrot did a 8-hour
because
I think it was like an 8-hour stream
likely to end with the two of you
beating
but it's not constructive to try and craft
the entirety of Strawberry Jam.
Sometimes it's fine to know a person just for a short time.
And that was a death that happened. Possibly multiple times, I don't know.
Kelsey brings her daughter to work, then leaves her with Diane so she can actually get work done. But when Diane gets a Todd adventure involving freeing a chicken from a factory farm, she, alongside Bojack, rushes to find and save her daughter. Although Bojack tries to make the entire thing about himself, and in the end gets them both stranded in the woods. Meanwhile, Todd manages to get Becca to safety at Gentle Farms, only to realize that Gentle Farms is still going to kill her, so it can't be that much safer. In the end, everything is fixed because Bojack knows a celebrity. The plot of this episode is something that eventually had to be answered. Stories with non-human main characters are still stories about humans, as the characters are always going to have human problems. The incarnation the characters take is typically going to be set dressing for some kind of metaphor, if it's relevant at all. Of course, in Bojack it's not relevant.
I buffered that,
Bojack
so it didn't.
For being a horse, and the only racial allegories that come up are mostly casual. Despite this, there are still going to be questions.
Oops.
Do humanoid animals eat meat? Do they eat meat of the same species as themselves? And how does that morality hold up in a modern world? The answer to these questions is a rather cynical one. We don't get some authentic moral justification. It's just a matter of not thinking about it too hard, the same way we try to avoid thinking about the...
Of course not, because,
function. And Bojack want the story of this episode to be about this.
Bob Odenkirk.
And while Diane is much closer to having...
Not Bob Odenkirk. What am I... Ralph Bob Waxberg. Is vegan, I'm pretty sure.
Because they care deeply about the
I think, or at least some of the writers were vegan. So it was like yeah.
About keeping her head down and being a character consultant, she wouldn't care. We all want to be the center of attention, but only if that attention is good. Only while we get to be the good guy.
See, I did it again.
Higher love. After accidentally telling Wanda he loves her, Bojack goes into an elaborate scheme to try and trick Wanda into saying it back.
I have no idea.
Fear that he may autoerotically asphyxiate himself. I can phrase that better. But she doesn't take the bait, telling him that he needs to be responsible for himself if he really cares about her, forcing Bojack to follow through on that self-improvement thing he mentioned a few episodes ago. Meanwhile, Princess Carolyn manages to revitalize the careers of Mr. Peanut Butter and J.D. Salinger with a new game show, only for nobody to properly appreciate any of the work she's put in. All anybody in this episode really wants is to be noticed, but they want that on their own terms. Bojack wants some confirmation that Wanda cares about him, but he wants it in a simple and unambiguous way, rather than the constant mini-affirmations that come with a relationship. He's used to grand romantic gestures and big stakes to little feelings, and can't really accept in a mature way that relationships can be as casual as they are. And of course, Princess Carolyn is trying to bury herself in work again after breaking up with Vincent in the previous episode. It's the same thing she did back in Season 1, and this time it's just as shallow a refuge as before. Success in the workplace is never going to replace the closest of a...
Oh my fuck! Wait, can I do that? Wait, let me try something.
Higher Love is also the first half of Season 2, and bisects the season
is it here?
of future plots and settings. Cordroy Jackson
Yeah.
dies at the end of the episode, and Hollywood stars and celebrities, what do they know things, let's find out, is created. Both having made the future of the plotlines that other characters are involved in.
Fuck! Stop!
Start to a new chapter in multiple characters' lives, and a decent way to keep the season rolling. Hank After Dark.
Okay, let me. I think you can save this. Like, I think you can save that.
Hank Hippopopoulos, which spirals into a vast web of news stories before ultimately getting shut down as there's too much profit to be made by believing Hank's side of the story. Todd gets mixed up with the Cordovian prince, and
there we go.
Maybe
no, you can't. You can't because you need the dash. Okay. It's fine. It's fine.
The messaging of this episode is mixed, but I think the main takeaway comes from the fact that people aren't as concerned with being spanky as they should be, and people are even less concerned with some third world war crimes ongoing. The only real stories most people seem to be concerned with keeping up around long term is stuff relating to celebrities knowing things. What do they know? Let's find out. So the less important...
But do they know things?
It will receive public attention. The events of this episode are what
That's the real question.
Work alongside Sebastian St. Clair, something she's been on the fence over for a while. It's Mr. Peanut Butter realizing that this is just the type of person Diane
Okay.
is.
Oh my god.
To step into fix things, even if she couldn't get away with not being involved. At least, this is the type of person Diane wishes to be seen as. Whether her self-image ends up matching the type of person she really is, we can only wait to see. Let's find out. BoJack is the first celebrity guest star on Hollywood Stars and Celebrities. What do they know? Do they know things? Let's find out. A baffling ordeal that thoroughly trashes his ego as he gets so many questions wrong. It's not until Princess Carolyn tells him about a tell Mr. Peanut Butter has that he begins to suddenly get more and more questions right, until it's close enough that he's able to throw at the last second at Wanda's request for good ratings. He ends up getting into an argument with Mr. Peanut Butter over last season, when BoJack tried to kiss Diane knowing she was engaged. And in the end, the two kiss in order to put their feelings behind them, because that's good television. BoJack claims not to care about the outcome of Hollywood Stars and Celebrities. What do they know about the outcome of Mr. Peanut Butter's show? Yet when his ego is challenged or damaged, he changes his mind and starts pursuing what he previously viewed as This is basically a repeat of the Muffins plot from season 1. BoJack views so many others as beneath him, right up until the point where he stops getting respect from them. Because can you really claim to be above something if it isn't currently groveling at your feet? And of course, all of this is because BoJack lacks self-respect. If he can't find love from other people, he surely won't be able to find comfort in loving himself.
Oh my god. I'm dying to this shit again.
That we aren't meant to take especially
It's so fucking ass, bro.
Falling out with Mr. Peanut Butter.
Oh shit.
It must resolve quickly because the audience is demanding that things get wrapped up neatly in 30 minutes. It doesn't get a proper resolution, but in the interest of professionalism, these things get put behind the actors so they can continue on with the show, in keeping with Mr. PB's philosophy of ignoring the past and other heavy subjects, in favor of momentary distractions.
Like, why am I dying to this shit, bro? This is so fucking cringe. I thought I fixed that.
The non-controversial, family-friendly direction the Secretariat movie is taking, BoJack and Kelsey sneak into the Nixon Presidential Library in order to steal a shot for the movie they both wanted to make. While trying to get the shot, they need a distraction, so Todd, Princess Carolyn, and character actress Marco Martindale break into an art store. TC gets enthralled in a painting and has a fantasy where she wants to have an easy and simple life, and she agrees to open a new agency with Rutabaga. Back at the library, BoJack struggles to fake cry for the shot, though he's still able to perform a listless sadness well enough that Turtle Tom fires Kelsey for sneaking out behind his back.
Based?
While this is going on, Diane realizes that she's not making the difference she had hoped to in Cordovia and heads back to Hollywood to live with BoJack. So many characters in this episode.
I keep doing that shit, bro.
Actually get what they want from a grand gesture. BoJack hopes that by getting a great shot of what he wants the movie to be, the executives will throw out all the focus group testing results they found and stick to the original idea. But all that sneaking around only results in the project losing its director. Diane hopes that by going out into the world and trying to make a real difference, that she'll truly find herself. And yet all she realizes is that egos will prevail no matter where she is, Cordovia or Hollywood. And of course, Princess Carolyn has been hoping that she can drown out her feelings of inadequacy in her work, but that's only gotten her more burnt out and less respected. Of course, her next journey, one into creating a new agency, is likely to be doomed to the same failures this episode is all about, but that's a story for later. The first scene of this episode shows BoJack being scolded for crying as a child, his mother punishing him for daring to show a genuine emotion. And at the end of this episode, we see him cry again when after all these years, he finally gets some sort of positive affection from a female role model. Kelsey's words of encouragement make BoJack realize that, for the first time, he's acting for a reason. He's going to get everything he wants from the world.
And then Kelsey gets fired. Whoop! Whoopsie daisy! Whoopsie daisy!
Yes, and... BoJack is disappointed about the direction Secretariat has been taking and vents those frustrations to the current director, Abe the Catfish, who BoJack assumed felt the same way. But when the director takes it as a slight against his quality of work, he begins doubling down on retakes and reshoots in order to torment BoJack so the latter can't go to New York.
Oh my god, fuck!
Like a real actor. Todd joins an improv group, which is and Diane continues to run away from Mr. Peanut Butter and her responsibilities. In the end, Bojack leaves everything behind and goes to New Mexico so he can reconnect with Charlotte. So many characters in this episode are continuously taking the easy way out of their problems, running away from facing their true insecurities and dealing with them in varyingly healthy ways. Bojack and Diane are physically running from their problems, with Bojack fleeing the state and Diane living in another country. Though both of them double down, and it seems as though they can't run any further. On the other end of the spectrum, Todd is lamenting the lack of affection he's receiving from Bojack, and so he finds a new circle of friends who accept him. Though he could have curated his next friend group a bit better if he wasn't desperate at the time. And then
I think this is...
That end job where she gets passed over for
That's probably actually savable, but whatever.
Instead tries starting her own agency. In this case, she's running away from her old life, but only after realizing there's nothing for her there, and genuinely trying to find fulfillment in that life.
I can't, like, I'm gonna fucking off myself. Oh my god, I can't say that.
By moving characters around,
even if it's a joke. This is so fucking cringe, bro.
Showing characters who are stuck in a place, and rather than their situations being a result of environmental factors outside their control, they're stuck because of who they are. Diane thought that Hollywood was the thing keeping her trapped in her ways.
Nope, stop. Okay, I'm just... It's fine. It's fine.
And is trying to leave to prove that it's not her. And Bojack himself, well, we'll see where he's going next episode.
No, not this episode. Oh, fuck. Oh, no. Oh, God.
Bojack spends 2 months in New Mexico with Charlotte's family, vicariously
Oh my
suburban
fuck.
could have had through them. As Penny's high school prom gets closer, he comes up with the idea to take her, as the boy she was interested in isn't returning those feelings. But far from the immediately popular hit he expected to be, the prom goes on pretty uneventfully, so Bojack, Penny, and 2 of her friends instead hit the town, reliving a night that Charlotte, Herb, and Bojack lived years and years ago. After that night, he tries kissing Charlotte, but when she rejects his offer to run away with him, he instead returns to his boat where Penny is waiting for him. When the two are walked in on, Charlotte drops the seasonal F-bomb and tells Bojack never to contact her again. He returns to LA to find Diane still sleeping in his house.
Okay.
It's probably not a coincidence that Bojack is trying to relive his glory days through a group of 3 young kids. The parallels to the cast of Horse and Around are clear, which makes Penny into a Sarah Lynn analog, and we've already seen the relationship those two have. Of course, all of this comes after a conversation with Charlotte about the LA tar pits. Bojack wants to run away from the person that he was in LA, and wants to go back to the way things were and the way he was. But when he's told that he's always been that way, a conversation mirroring the one from the beginning of the season, he realizes that he can't escape himself, and he'll bring the same issues with him no matter where he goes. So of course, with nothing to lose, he quickly snaps back to the person he was all along. He stops pretending. To say that Bojack makes a mistake that ruins his relationship with Charlotte would almost be a misnomer. Bojack doesn't act in a manner that's unusually abrasive, he just shows his real self for a moment. The one moment of real Bojack is all it takes to undo 2 months of goodwill. 2 months revealed as the farce of a liar. It's not LA he wants to escape from,
Oh my
it's Bojack.
fucking god, dude.
Out to sea. Bojack returns to LA to find that the movie was finished in post without him. Not only that, but they're Oscar baiting and trying to publicize him into the next big star. An
Based?
comment he made at the beginning of the season also results in him opening up an orphanage with his Horse and Around residuals. So while he was running from all his problems in New Mexico, he became a star and a philanthropist without doing anything. Rutabaga possibly gets back together with his wife, leading Princess Carolyn to have doubts about their business and relationship. So she moves ahead without him, hiring Diane to be a ghostwriter but for celebrity tweets. Not the job she thinks she needs to do, but it gets her off of Bojack's couch, which is now empty, as Todd sets sail on the Giggle ship. Bojack rescues him from this by pointing out how letting Todd stay with him was the only good thing he ever did on purpose. Everybody manages to fail upwards through this entire episode, Hollywood constantly rewarding people when they're at a personal low and punishing them at a personal high. For the former,
Oh my god.
2 finale, one that manages to wrap up so many ongoing plot lines in the least satisfying possible way. But far from this being a criticism, it's actually thematically relevant. Things don't happen for a reason, they just happen. If the world had a sense of karmic justice equivalent to that of a TV show, Bojack wouldn't get a happy ending, Diane would have to face the consequences of what she's done, and very few people would even get a story to tell. And so the show goes on, because it has to. The one refuge from this indifferent randomness BoJack is able to find is by rescuing Todd from the cruise ship. He becomes a beloved American idol without any real input. He becomes a hero who builds orphanages by mistake. He can't do anything right, but he can't do anything wrong either. Even barely crossing the line into a statutory in the previous episode doesn't have any real punishment, as he simply runs back to LA. The only loss being a relationship he never really had in the first place. Season 2 wrap-up. With Season 1, much of the setting of Hollywood and the characters of the show had to be introduced and given a conceit to build off of for later. Season 2 is when we finally get to see what's built on the foundation left before. And what you there is a repetitive Tower of Babel, iterating on itself again and again.
Babel? Is that what he did? Did he just say Babel?
Jack learns multiple times throughout the season that the only thing wrong with his...
I shouldn't make fun of pronunciation, but Babel?
...change about his circumstances. The issues are always going to be looking back at him through the...
Maybe it's a different thing, I don't know.
Diane makes attempts to find herself during the season, but when she actually does, she hates what she...
I might be stupid.
Of course,
I'm not sure.
Nowhere to go that helps you escape the reality of who you are, she returns back to the Hollywood life, writing celebrity tweets, possibly as far as you can fall on the usefulness scale after journalism in Cordovia. And Princess Carolyn has to take care of somebody no matter where she is in her life. Rutabaga seems like the kind of person struggling in the same boat as her until his marriage gets back on track. At that point, it looks like he has his life more under control than she does, and so she abandons him to all of his burnt bridges. Maybe it's not a coincidence that she spent the first half of the season dating a literal child in a trench coat. There seems to be a formula in the final 2 episodes of each season where the penultimate episode is the true finale, and the actual finale merely sets up the next season. As if to pair the messages of, these are the consequences of your actions, and then life goes on. One could be cynical and say that the showrunners are detracting from their message by trying to make another season, but that would only resonate well if the show were mediocre and repeated its messages in a shallow way. Instead, we have a more depressing realization as to just how cyclical all of the misery is, when the thing you're running from is yourself. Start spreading the news. BoJack is on tour promoting the Secretariat movie when the interviews start denigrating the show horsing around for being, well, sitcom schlock. He gets defensive, but his publicist starts to tell him that it makes for a better story of
oh my god. I can't.
And he's finally
every time I get to the last room, I'm gonna get there, or this isn't the last room, the last difficult room. Like the last technically difficult room. I got there yesterday from this room too, and I died in a less bad way. That was just fucking stupid.
The season 2 finale was all about how BoJack is trying to recapture his past, going back to the horse he used in an attempt to redo his old life and reclaim a new one. But since his problems are rooted much more deeply than his decisions, and
like, it's really not hard. That's like easy as fuck. The only even remotely difficult part is this reverse bunny hop, which I don't even have to do this. Like, I could do different tech. It just, I don't know. I don't even know why I do it. It's kind of cool. Cool factor.
Where his life seemed to make sense and he had everything he ever wanted. Although in all the flashbacks we see of that time, he's miserable and drunk, constantly complaining about everything around him. So really, all he has of his past is the memory of it, and when that's challenged, he has to deal with the fact that he never really had any real happiness all along. With this realization that his life has always been destined to failure, he turns to honest pharmacopoeia.
Okay, I don't know. I think I'm gonna do... I should have said do not save.
His own life, then he'll stop making so many mistakes that ruin it. That is, if everybody else has his best interest at heart. Horseman show. Hooray! Flashback episode. This episode takes place in 2007.
Okay, low death run.
Full creation and later destruction of the BoJack Horseman show. Not to be confused with BoJack Horseman, the show, or BoJack Horseman, the guy. We see where various characters were during 2007, including Princess Carolyn starting her career as a proper agent.
Okay, it starts now. Low death run starts right now.
Diane for the first time, and Todd in an early relationship.
Okay, all right. Low death run starts now. Actually, low death actually starts now.
With BoJack, specifically in how their lives have moved on since their competing TV shows. Bojack defines himself by this single successful career move and hasn't mentally moved beyond that, whereas Mr. PB doesn't define himself by a single thing he's done, constantly putting himself back out in the spotlight to pursue whatever.
Okay, that's fine. That's expected.
Characters in this episode also get a bit of exploration insofar as their identities are concerned.
Okay, also expected. I hate this fucking room.
Bojack that her boss is unable to, and in the end, does get her dream.
I hate this fucking room.
Since this is a flashback, we know the dramatic irony.
Oh my lord, have mercy.
Status. Todd also deals with the struggle to find identity as he's pushed into a
Oh my god, bro.
that he's not entirely comfortable with. For now, this is really more of a comic relief subplot, and it doesn't evolve beyond that much further until much later in the show's run.
Yeah, that's fine.
Last telling thing
It's fine, only a few deaths.
how much they've changed physically in the time between 2007 and the current year, or in Bojack's case, how he hasn't. Everybody else has changed. either
Okay,
their
sure.
career or hairstyle,
Sure.
but Bojack looks nearly identical to the way that he currently does. Mr. Peanut Butter has changed very little as well, but since he's always been much
Sure.
a person, this isn't as surprising. Bojack kills.
Sure.
When investigating Cuddly Whiskers' house for a note Jill Phil wrote him years ago, Bojack and Diane come across a dead orca in his pool, and they're suspected of the murder. Assuming somebody is trying to frame Bojack, they begin an investigation that leads the duo to Whale World, run by a former pit bull on Horsing Around. It's soon discovered that Bojack is the name of a strange drug, and that there was no real conspiracy against him after all. Meanwhile, Todd and Mr. Peanut Butter get sprayed by a skunk and burn the lawn down in an attempt to clean up after the fact. When Bojack and Diane meet with Cuddly Whiskers in Ojai, the former writer tells Bojack that the only way to rid yourself of desire is to part with material possessions. A fact that he states in an expensive property surrounded by fancy teas after winning several awards and accolades. The entire message rings pretty hollow considering
Okay.
which the message is being wielded.
I don't know why the fuck I did that, but okay.
Presented by a man living on a property which he only uses to run away from his stresses, and told to Bojack, who has already tried running away from his problems multiple times. It's par for the course for Bojack to take this advice to heart and to fall into the same pit he's fallen into before, and maybe a little bit more inevitable as Bojack is meeting with the person who is happy in a way that he's not, despite doing something Bojack himself has already tried once. There's a bit of irony in the fact that Bojack feels his life was ruined by Hollywood and the lifestyle that followed him throughout his acting career, visiting a place where women are exploited in nearly the exact same way, but, you know, without the millions of dollars that can
Okay.
hardships. The narrative itself dismisses this as Bojack grasping at straws, but there's still something to be
Okay.
Bojack
I'm just gonna say okay after every death because it's every death has been really fucking cringe.
He had lost his horsing around money and had to live a mundane suburban life. A later season will only give us a short glimpse into this sort of setting change, and for now it's an idea that's more or less dismissed. Fish out of water. A mostly wordless episode detailing Bojack going to an underwater film festival to promote the upcoming second.
One try on the one that actually didn't matter. Cool.
A thumbs up gesture, which means something else there, and desperately tries to reconnect with Kelsey in order to properly apologize to her. But all of these incidents take a back seat in favor of returning a lost seahorse to its father. So the obvious theme of this episode is communication, or rather the difficulties that arise due to a lack of it. Bojack miscommunicates with an interviewer and gives an offensive thumbs up to the underwater community. He tries to communicate with Kelsey, but ends up never being able to properly reach her. And he ends up lost and confused in a foreign land because he's unable to properly communicate his pleas to others. It's not until the end of the episode where he realizes that so many of his woes are due to an improper way of thinking. He's been underwater the entire time, he can just swim up and away at any moment. His mindset being the only thing locking him into a 2D.
I don't know what that was. Let's go find out.
Premiere is a success, mostly because he wasn't there to botch it in any meaningful way. One can't help but wonder what would have happened if, at one point in this episode, Bojack encountered Kelsey while in possession of the seahorse.
11? It felt more than that, but that's pretty good. That's not terrible for
in order to do, quote,
3,200 deaths and 10 hours.
attached himself to,
I guess. A lot of the deaths were pretty stupid, so...
speculation.
But the stupid deaths also matter, right? Like, it's not like... Yeah. I don't know.
Love and or marriage.
Okay.
Crashes a wedding.
I'm done.
Because people love it when celebrities drink their alcohol.
My fingers hurt.
He accidentally
I'm done.
convinces one of the brides that she may not be ready for marriage. It's then up to him